My name is Nigel Gooding, the founder of the Data Privacy Advisory Service, DPAS, and I'm really excited to chair the Data Champions webinar today. With me, I've got three very experienced individuals who have had great involvement in the Data Champions introduction into their organizations, but also in the back office in terms of providing training support. So without no further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves. And Stacey, I think that you should go first and introduce yourself and your role with Data Champions.
Hello everyone. I'm sorry, first of all, apologies, I had connection problems this morning, so apologies for being slightly late. My name's Stacey. I'm from Torridge District Council in North Devon. I'm head of legal and governance here, and responsible for data protection, so I'm also the council's data protection officer.
Thank you, Stacey, very much. And are you in that office next to the Torridge Pitfalls Rugby Club? So whenever I go to referee there, I always think, I could work in that office. What a lovely view it must be of the estuary.
Yeah, that's the office that we're in, overlooking the river. So
very lucky. For those people who have not been to Bideford or Appledore and Torridge District, I would highly recommend it for a holiday. It's a lovely spot, a lovely part of the world. Thank you, Stacey. Barry.
Just help if I come off on mute. Thank you for inviting me.
It sounded like you were unlocking the castle door there, Barry.
Do you know what? I was doing some training yesterday, and the amount of times I had to say those immortal words. Now you're on mute. But thank you for inviting me, Nigel. I'm really pleased to participate in this. So just a bit background about me. So I've worked mostly in the NHS in my life. I trained as a nurse back in the 1970s. So, Nigel, I have a bit of empathy and with you working in ED or A&E as it used to be called, because that was my speciality as well. But I've been doing data protection, information governance for about 25 years. I've worked in acute trusts, 2 large acute trusts. I've sort of semi-retired now, although it doesn't feel like that some days. And I'm the DPO for about 120 GP practices, 3 hospices, a couple of private health organisations, and I do lots of training on senior information risk owner, call Descartes, data protection impact assessments, subject access request, plus also some consultancy when asked and when I've got the time.
Thanks very much, Barry, and we'll come back to your involvement in Data Champions shortly. And Natalie.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Morning, everyone. My name's Natalie. I actually work for Nigel. I work as a data protection consultant and deliver quite a large amount of our training, including our Data Champions training and implementing that into organisations.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Emma, if you could press the button, that would be helpful. Great. So why introduce Data Champions? Well, it's quite interesting that Data Champions, and some people, organisations call them Data Guardians, but they have different representations for the role. We've just done a piece of work for a very large unitary authority looking at the root cause analysis of why data breaches happen. And one of the remediation points that we established, and these are real live survey results, that 90% of those staff who were involved in a data incident, breach, felt that if they had a data champion, i.e. someone in their organization, HR, finance, procurement they could go to, they would find it reasonably helpful in their work to understand their data protection responsibilities. And certainly 92% of those people that we surveyed felt that there was certainly an opportunity that if a data champion was available, that they could be the conduit for information relative to data protection. They could be the go-to person in the organization. So quite a warm feeling around data champions in the large unitary authority, which hadn't introduced them per se as such, but may do as a result of our work with them. And Nav, who's a great friend of mine, we did some work with one of the largest utility companies in the UK. He was the senior information security officer, and Nav was very keen that whilst working as a Cisco, the implementation of data champions across the organization felt that the organization became more engaged. There were the new changes in GDPR, but also the changes in policy and procedure in the organisation were well perceived. And also there was an opportunity for us, because we were the data protection officer at the time, to spread the message through a network of individuals sitting within the organisation. So a real positive spin there from Nav, who was Cisco in charge of the responsibility. And to put this into context, that organisation looked after 23 million data subjects, personal data. So we're talking about a big number. Emma, so where will we see the? Can you the next slide, please, Emma? So where do we see the next on this next slide? Where do we see data champions fitting in? Well, ultimately, responsibility for the protection or compliance sits at the highest possible level in an organisation. And below that might be a data protection officer, a legal team, risk and assurance committee, data protection manager, information governance manager. And one of the ways that organisations are looking at data champions is looking at continual personal development opportunities for individuals, having someone sat in an individual organisation. How do you eat an elephant? Well, you chop it up into bite-sized chunks is the old 1990s. Barry's old enough to remember this, the 1990s management speaks and all the courses that we used to go on. It's about chopping up the elephant, but also it's about having a champion for compliance, a champion for data protection within an organisation. So my view is that data champion is a valid role within an organisation. It allows our data protection professionals to get messages out quickly. It allows good practice and custom to get out quickly. But rather than hearing from me, I'm really keen to hear from our real live experiences. So if we go to the next slide, Emma, that would be very useful. And I'm going to call on Stacey to give us her experience as a practitioner, a DPO in a district authority, a district local authority, about the introduction of data champions and what was your prompt? So Stacey, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, we have data protection champions and always have done actually. The predominant reason is, although I'm data protection officer, we have different teams doing different areas, and it's not possible for me to know, as data protection officer, the sort of information that may be running in between those departments. So within Torridge, we have different managers. So we'll have a HR manager, for example, we'll have a planning manager, for example, and they've all got different types of data, different types of requirements. We obviously also have many freedom of information requests, subject access requests. So I expect them to also take responsibility for the work within their departments, to produce data schedules, to produce their retention schedules. I'm here obviously to help guide them through any of that, but they are operationally day-to-day on the ground. So we have approximately 10 data protection champions within Torridge, and we have regular meetings. We have quarterly meetings to run through bits and pieces, and we update our documentation, and I ask them to review things like retention schedules once every 12 months.
Cool. Now, Stacey, one of the things that you said was quite interesting. That, but the sounds of it, you divided your council up into bite-sized chunks. Excuse my sort of going back to 1990s management speak there. But so who are your data champions? Are they managers, or are they leaders in the team, or are they people who came forward and they put their hand up and say, yeah, I'd like to do that role?
Predominantly, they're team leaders or the managers within those departments. I would never stop anybody from coming forward if they did have a particular interest in data protection, but they need to have enough authority within the authority to kind of stipulate what we should and shouldn't be doing. So I've passed it all down to the operational managers within Torridge, and they are responsible within their teams, or for passing on areas of work within their teams to make sure that it's done, because it's critically important, especially within a council, to make sure that we are compliant, and we take that responsibility really seriously. So it's generally people fairly senior within Torridge that have that data protection role.
Stacey, can I park that there and come back to that and come across to Barry? But Barry, in your experience, and clearly you're very experienced, have you come across so in Stacey's model sounds like it's fairly mandatory and actually it's about dilution down the management leadership chain of responsibility of the DPO, which is great, fantastic from a data champion's point. Have you found any other models that you've come across or you've implemented in your work?
Having worked in two large acute trusts, there's always things that you want other people to do, and having eyes and ears in other departments. Now, I totally get where Stacey's coming from, and actually a good thing to have are department managers, service managers, and under GDPR, we may now call them information asset owners in departments, whereby they're the eyes and ears around that department who know what data is being processed, and for them to be the link between either in a hospital, senior information risk owner, the Caldecott Guardian, the DPO, the IG team. I think it's good to have those. I think as much as it is a good principle and something totally to support, because I think the NHS would talk about empowering people, to have that responsibility, not just the IG team or the DPO. It does make sense to have data champions throughout an organization. So as much as, it's good, I think from my own experience, it changes. So you put somebody in that post and you want them to be the eyes and ears, you want them to escalate to you issues they see, they move on and you then have to start again. If I go into my present experience as being the DPO for 120 GP practices, my data champions are the practice managers. And, they don't have the great expertise. They're the jack of all trades. They know some things about data protection, GDPR, but they're not the experts. But, they are the people who I rely on to come back to me with any issues they have and they see. And I think one of the issues that we have is training, getting the time to train people to know what to look for, what the risks are, and so on. So I think they're absolutely vital, because a CIRO, a DPO cannot be everywhere, and it's good to have, but I think it needs to be modelled, and we need to think about that.
Barry, thank you very much for that. I'm moving on to Natalie shortly. It's quite interesting that I can see on the participants list a couple of clients that I've worked with in a large sixth form college, further education college, and I remember when I went to do the data champion training, they had, because of they're on disparate sites, and I guess Torridge is the same, and I guess you're definitely, Barry, the same, because you've got 120 different surgeries. You've got disparate sites, you've got different organizations, you're processing different personal data. And one of the challenges is that you as a DPO can't be across 120 sites, or Stacey, I'm not quite sure how many sites you've got, but say 4 or 5 sites or whatever, or 8 organizations or 10 organizations, anything from ranging from electoral services to housing benefit, that's a local authority if you look at that, and waste and recycling. And I remember going to the sixth form college, and sorry for those people on the call, calling you a sixth form college, but a higher education institute, and the enthusiasm which was round that room at the time from the individuals. And I got a mug, by the way. I love data protection, and I've still got that mug, by the way. So I got but everyone had something to take away, and they were enthused, and all of a sudden they came back with a load of questions. And it was for me as a trainer, it was a fantastic experience. Natalie, you've done. How did you find your training sessions? Because you set up the training sessions working with Stacey's team, and how did you find it? How did you find them? How did you find the motivation in the room?
So I've worked with Stacey quite a lot actually now, and Stacey's group are great, and we're a shining example of exactly the sort of delegates that you would like to be on a training course. But to sort of echo what Barry said, and to answer your question, Nigel, I think one of the major things that I find on delivering this training, which really, really popular at the moment, is that it's the people that are there entirely dictate the direction that you're going. And one of the big things that I try and sort of get across is that data protection compliance, as we all know, it's not a tick box exercise, and diluting those things and making sure every member of staff at some point is understanding something. I think we're better off a lot of people understanding little rather than little people understanding a lot. And so I think it's really beneficial that those data champions don't necessarily have to be, as Barry said, the most clued up people in the world. They don't have to be data protection specialists by any means. I think the hardest part is putting this to people that are genuinely interested, that are generally have some sort of passion, if you like, for the area. And then that's then diluted down to the teams that they work with, within, above, under, whichever department they're in. The big hurdle in the training is certainly having the people that are responsive and the people that want to be there.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for that, Natalie. Stacey, one of the things that I'm always interested in, and being the entrepreneur in me always says, well, Stacey, how did you sell the benefits of data champions to the organisation? And I'd be interested to see how did you sell the benefits, and what challenges, if any, did you have when you decided to go for data champions, and also invest in them in terms of giving them the training, etc.
Yeah, I think people generally get scared by data protection. And I think within Torridge, I would say most people are interested because we have, as a district council, most of our decision-making process is supposed to be transparent, but then there are some situations, obviously, where we have to hold information back. So I think day-to-day requests that come in relation to information, teams are worried. Can we disclose that? Can we not? What should we be doing? What shouldn't we be doing? So it really does integrate into everyday life within the council. So in terms of getting people to be interested in it, that they're interested because they want to know how to be able to perform their roles adequately. The data champions was a lot easier from that perspective. I think all the managers take it seriously, but if I say something like planning, which is a very transparent process, they often get objections about things that are put on the website for the planning application, and they want to know what they need to put in, what they have to redact. So from that perspective, I think I've been really lucky. I've had quite a lot of keen participants in it. We don't train everybody to a massively high level. The training will be dependent upon the role that they're performing within the organisation. But I would say what we do is make sure that all staff are trained to a basic level, so that they are aware if something doesn't seem right, or if there is a potential problem, so they can either come to me or one of the data champions to seek further guidance. So it's, I think, more about depicting when there may be a problem rather than having to solve that themselves.
Cool, Stacey. So just could you give a quick resume? What would you say the data champions do in Torridge?
So they are responsible for the data that they hold within the departments, for how long they should keep that data, for the deletion schedules. If obviously they've got a new computer system, they need to do the words have gone from me now, but all of that. So they'll be responsible for guiding their teams over what should be disclosed, what shouldn't be disclosed. I will do the policy as a whole for the council, but really responsible for day-to-day operations. I mean, I think I'll go back to the planning as an example. I mean, they have applications coming in daily, sometimes hundreds. They need to be put on the website, but a lot of the time they'll be coming through and asking questions, but the questions have been, since we've got the champions in place, they kind of feel happier to be able to deal with those issues themselves. But I expect them to be responsible effectively for the documentation within their departments, because I don't necessarily know what's coming in and out on a day-to-day basis, and to be fair, can't possibly know, and that's why everyone needs to take responsibility.
Totally, Stacey, and having worked for the Jersey government, and the island's only 8 by 5, but you can imagine there are 8,000 people work for the organisation. from everything from health to all the way through to defence to immigration services, across multiple sites. One of the things that the organisations look at when they introduce data champions is some have quite a hands-on role. So, for example, that they're responsible for investigating data breaches in their organisation. They're responsible for producing or supporting DPIAs for their organisation, data protection impact assessments for their organisations. Whereas some organisations actually are quite light touch. That they are. Some organisations are quite light touch, whereby it is just, for example, an opportunity for someone, if they have a problem, to go and ask for advice from that individual. Barry, what about your experience in terms of job role and job description? Because this is always part of someone else's job, isn't it? It's not their main job, but it's part of their job. What models have you seen in terms of data champions and what their role is?
So let me, I'd just like to go back on the question you asked Stacey as well, because I think it does answer part of the question. I think we all know, apart from maybe people like me, I always say that, you know, I'm the geek, I'm the anorak, I love data protection, I love GDPR, I have a passion for it. But you go out and talk to people in the organisation, it's boring. It is boring. That's their perception of it. But we need to change that. And I was thinking about, how do we engage? And I think there are a number of ways. I think, you know, if we can get managers to see this is part of their personal development, it would be a good place. You know, it needs to be in there.
How do we do that, Barry? How do we do that? How do we? Because you just said if we see managers to see this as part of their personal development, what's the secret in that, Barry?
Well, I think the secret is, and I was going to come, is providing them with the tools. Now, you know that, you know, when I do training, I try and make it engaging, inspiring. I try and do it different, not just because, you know, it's just to do it different. But if we want to get a message across to the champions, but then the champions to get it across to their staff in their department or their services, then we have to think about the old presentations of PowerPoint presentations. It has been long said, you know, death by PowerPoint. I think we need to look at different ways. And some of the ways that we can support is giving them the tools to be able to do that job. You know, and I normally say, just before GDPR came in, the ICO produced an infographic, 12 steps to take now. And the first one was awareness. How can we give the tools to the champions to be able to go to their staff? We need to be able to support them and to give them those things so that, you know, they can say they enjoy it, and therefore they might inspire others to enjoy it. You know, and that's the way I would look at it. But job descriptions, I think you're absolutely right. When it comes to department managers, service managers, information asset owners that are required for those things that Stacey mentioned, about knowing what IT systems they are, what information they're collecting, who they're sharing it with, it's never written in job description. And I think if people see it as part of their job role, so when they are recruited, it's in their job description, that is part of what they do. But it has to be something then that we support, because they'll just look at it and think, I haven't got a clue. Cool. We know, Nigel, you know, we provide training for Caldecott, Cyros, and many of them just see it in their job description, but haven't got a clue. We need to make sure that we give them inspired training so that they can inspire others.
Barry, that was the perfect lead into Natalie. Natalie, you run training for Stacey's team. Talk us through what a typical training session looks like. What are the outcomes that you're looking for from your training?
So obviously things have changed. We're all aware over the last 18 months, coming up for 2 years. I think the transition from classroom-based training to remote training has been quite difficult for a lot of us. However, as Barry just said, and I've sat on some of Barry's courses and can attest that they are very engaging. I think I generally try and keep things as relaxed as possible. So, for instance, when we worked with Stacey, I tend to go through some kind of syllabus, if it be even if it is a little bit of a rough one. We'll have some sort of general outcomes. You know, what do you want to go over?
What are the outcomes you're looking for? Give us some detail. Give us some detail.
So at the moment, the basic, so obviously we offer lots of different training, but our off the shelf, if you like, basic outcomes would be a basic understanding. The biggest thing I look for is actually the curiosity, the inquisition of what does that mean or how do we use that? So we cover things like DPIAs, data breach reporting, maintaining your record of processing activities and information asset registers, staff training, implementation of policies and procedures. But the big thing is relating it back to that organization. I could tell anybody how to do a DPIA. You know, in these instances, you must action a DPIA. DPIA looks like this, and this is how you should fill it in. It's about making that relevant and making sure that those delegates understand how these are things apply to their roles. And Stacey, I don't know if you have anything to add here, but one of the big things in Stacey's group are very good. And like Stacey said, they're very varied. They're across lots of different departments. This data champion role is an add-on to a primary role. So it's about making it accessible to people and making it useful in the workplace without taking over from actually what their primary role is. It's useless trying to train people to a DPO standard and telling them, equipping with all these things. They don't have the time or the resources to do that. That isn't their role. The main outcome is for them to have a basic understanding of when, more than maybe how or why. But when do we need to do these things? And then from that, once you can identify these places, just knowing where to go, who do I contact about this? Or, you know, who do I tell my staff that they should seek, or what resources are available? You know, the ICA's website's a great resource, and I don't think it's used enough, that making sure that all of your staff understand what that is. Really hard question, I think, Nigel, to answer. I've given you a wishy-washy answer there, but it's so different per organisation. Depending on who those delegates are and how they sit within the organisation you're training them for.
Cool. I had an experience on Monday. I went for a pre-op. I had an operation the 20th of December, and I went for an operation pre-op check. And I lay down on the bench and had an ECG. For those people who don't know, I work part-time in the A&E department at Exeter Hospital. And I was lying there with an ECG thinking this is lovely because there was a one-on-one with a nurse and it was a quiet environment. This is great. But what happens if you have suspected stroke or you have suspected cardiac arrest and you've arrived at the hospital and the noises are going on, there's lots of people running around, lots of shouting, lots of monitors going off, you're strapped up. Look at the experience of that individual against mine. And one of the things I thought was, well, it isn't the great experience, as Barry quite rightly said, the best experience any manager DPO can get is talking to the people on the front line and understanding how they process personal data, what they do with it, how long they keep it, what the challenges are. And I certainly think that, and I certainly think what I'm hearing from Barry, Stacey, and I think this morning is that engaging of those people who do the job on a day-to-day basis surely will give you a better understanding of the organisation at large in your role as information governance manager and data protection officer. One thing I want to move to Stacey with Stacey is that we were talking about. We talked earlier about the benefits to the organisation. What about the benefits to the individual? Those people who become the data champion, Stacey. What do you see the benefits to the individuals are? Because you know it's not always about the organisation. It's about the men and women who are doing these jobs on a daily basis.
I think it gives them the tools to be able to assist with doing their job on a daily basis. If I'm honest, I think just sort of following on from what Natalie says, and a lot of people are very scared of data protection, or they find it dull. And I think the worst thing is to sit here quoting legislation at them, and I think that's when people have a propensity to switch off. And I say that I'm a solicitor, but I think it's the worst way to try and teach people. And when it comes to the training, as Natalie was just saying, what we've tended to do is have smaller groups and kind of put it so that they can ask real life situations, real life scenarios that may affect their teams or their departments or that they have. And I think that's what gets people more engaged with the whole process. But it also gives them the tools and the comfort to do their job going forward. So, I mean, there is never, like Natalie said, a one size fits all answer to data protection, but it does give them a bit more comfort with that when they get this request in, they feel more equipped to be able to deal with that, or more equipped to go, actually, this is a little bit outside my expertise. I need to go and seek help elsewhere. So I think, I don't know if I can speak for the others, but I can certainly speak from within Torridge that that's what it does. Day to day, it makes it easier for them to be able to perform their job, because yes, they're managers. Data protection isn't their only one part. That they're doing other roles. You know, they're operational managers within our team, but they get daily requests from members of the public, and they're never, you know, 100% sure whether they can comply with this, whether they should do, or whether there's a problem. So I think it assists them, and I think that's why our champions are always very happy to undertake the role, because it assists them, you know, day to day in what they need to do.
Stacey, and that's brilliant, because what that does is that you are selling the benefits to the organisation by selling it through the individuals, by saying, look, it'll make your job easier. So in essence, you're articulating a data protection compliance regime on the basis of it's part of your job, which it is, because data not only has a value to the organisation, but that value needs to be protected. So that's a positive. But actually saying, but look, if you really understand what the framework that we operate under is, you won't be, one, too scared, two, you won't be frightened to do things with the information and personal data you have, and three, it makes your job easier. I think it's a great way of selling the benefits. Barry, what about you? What from your experience, what's in it for the people who become data champions? What are the benefits to them?
Yeah, most of the people I deal with is in the health and social care arena, and you're absolutely right. So the way for me is information governance, data protection is about patient safety. And, you know, if we can sell that to them, because they are concerned about the care to their service users, their patients. And if they see IG as part of patient safety, I think one is we're likely to get them on board. And that's a great benefit to them, because they then are delivering care, not only physical care, but also around their information. I've seen that as a great benefit. I think also, you know, the benefit for the individual, and I say to some people sometimes is, you know, this is my information, it's your information. And if they see that, you know, we need to look after their information safely and securely and use it in an appropriate way, one is you're likely to get them on board. But that's a great benefit for them, because, you know, in their daily life, they can have a look at saying, what are the benefits to me of protecting data and, you know, not sharing it inappropriately? And then when they apply that to their service users, their patients, you know, I think it puts them in a good place. So I think there are lots of benefits like that. I think also the benefits are across the whole organization, because a lot of these people who we're talking about, data champions, are these service managers, these department managers. And we need them on board, because, you know, our work isn't only just data protection in the sense, it's subject access requests, it's completing of DPIAs, it's freedom of information requests. And if they can see that, you know, there are benefits to the whole organization of them understanding and knowing what their responsibilities are, I think they will enjoy, I'd like to think they would enjoy their job more and feel that they are contributing more, but not necessarily, you know, having to do a lot more hours, if I can put it that way, because it ought to become a part of business as usual. But because they know where the information is, they know what they can do with it, they're far more comfortable. So I think it would give people a greater benefit in that they are doing a good job.
Thanks, Barry. Natalie, what about your experience? What are the benefits to the individuals as being a data champion?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna echo what Stacey and Barry have said. And especially for us in our sector, our organisation, our business, I think data protection is something that's only becoming more and more popular. You know, we see some massive big tech firms and such that are really focusing on that sort of thing. And I'd go as far to say there's very few jobs on this earth where data protection does not come into play in some way, shape, or form. And so having that sort of thorough understanding of what you're doing and the implications behind what you're doing is only going to help moving forward. I think, like Barry says, if you know you appreciate that patient care, I might have history in teaching, obviously in education. The same with teaching and those kind of staff that are around children, the safeguarding implications and how that works. I think just the bigger picture that builds for us all moving forward it is beneficial to anybody. I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't benefit from understanding to some extent.
That's you've picked up a really interesting point actually, and particularly around safeguarding. Safeguarding is a really interesting point, and we'll be running a special webinar in January, reference to safeguarding and sharing of data and the fear around that. And those people who work in the public sector will understand where the fear comes from, and most of it is ill-placed. But the ability to understand what you can and can't do without reference is really important. And as Stacey quite rightly said, it makes your day job easier. Now, it's 11:39. We only really use 40 minutes up of these sessions here, but I'm going to use 45 minutes up. So you won't have death by webinar, ladies and gents. But we've got a couple of questions that have come in, which I'd like to put to the panel. And I'll start with Natalie, really. We may have covered it, but it's your opportunity, Natalie, I think, to articulate any other message as well that you want around data guardians. But I'll read the question out, team, and I'll phrase it every time, Barry and Stacey, when we come to it. But the question we've had in is from one of my people on my network, and the question is phrased: I'd be interested in tomorrow's panel's thoughts on whether having data champions help shares the load of the DPO and helps colleagues realise that data protection isn't just the DPO's job, or conversely, if it strengthens the perception of data protection as something separate from the day job. So I suppose that's two parts of the question in that to me. Does data champions help share the load of the DPO? And secondly, is there a risk that actually the DPO's role might be diluted by having data champions? What's your thoughts on that, Natalie?
So I think we need to, there's a line here to be tread, isn't there? That there's a difference between data champions supporting the DPO's activities and ensuring that that they're useful and they're working in that BAU sense. Or I think crossing the line is diluting the DPO. I think having that go-to person that has the education, the background, fits that role is invaluable. However, in order for that person to work effectively, then I also think the role of data champions or similar is also invaluable. They should be instilling the message and the culture that the DPO is already putting in place. They're your team leaders to your senior management, if you like. You can't run an organization, can you, with just senior management? You need other people, team leaders, people that are doing things on the ground that are making things work. And I see the relationship being very similar. To answer the second part, yes, I think if you give too much role and responsibility, if you like, to a data champion, you run the risk of diluting the need for a DPO. But I think ultimately the value is much more in having a one-stop man, lady that has the better education. So I would sit on the side of the fence that the data champions support the DPO and do not dilute their role, as long as those responsibilities are evenly or correctly delegated.
Cool. Thank you very much. And I think, of course, GDPR, one of the articles 37, 39, one of the articles is that the data controller should support the DPO in their activity and make all resources available. And that's time from individuals and training as well. Well, one thing that we may not have touched on is succession. I see the data champion's role as great succession planning. I see because I see the opportunity. The opportunities for individuals who are picking up knowledge, picking up enthusiasm, picking up tips from the DPO, sharing the workload as well. I see it succession planning because we're all banging on about there aren't enough information governance and security people out there. Well, isn't this an opportunity to start growing your own within the organization? You know, Barry, what are your thoughts about it? Does it support the DPO or does it dilute the role and therefore you're in danger of losing the central message?
Nigel, do me out of a job. No, I mean that seriously. You know, the end of the day is if we had data champions who actually did a really good job and they were the eyes and ears and they saw things and they reported them and they did all that stuff. Do you know what? I would feel that I've done my job. Do me out of a job. Having said that, we know that's not going to happen. And they would always need somebody to refer to. And I've made a note here saying, involve the data champions in, you know, the future planning and you know, we've got some things coming up. We've got the health and care bill coming up. We've got the Oliver Dowden data, the new direction. You know, involve. How will it mean? What will it mean to the organisation, to them, if you know some things changed? I think you know there are some things like that that I don't have a problem with, and I'd want them to. Succession planning, and I'm really pleased that you've asked that because one of the things that tomorrow might be the last day that we eventually get the last comment from the Department of Education on the apprenticeship, the information governance data protection apprenticeships that has been approved. We're just waiting for the funding, which is tomorrow, to be agreed. Now, talk about succession planning. Now, some of these people we're talking about, data champions, are going to be, you know, service managers and whatever. They will not be our replacements in the future. Great if they saw the IG as being really inspiring and something they want to take part in. But some of them may well be even at a more junior level. And the apprenticeship might be something that they could do as part of their personal development.
Yeah.
It's not for new starters, but it could be something that, you know, we could say, look, it goes through the things about data sharing, about DPIAs, subject access requests, about reviewing policies. Now, great if we can get data champions to be a part of that. So that brings in people who we could inspire to be our next DPOs.
Yeah, Barry, that's really important. You know, I'm a great believer. You know, those people who know I'm involved in professional sport, rugby, and I'm a great believer in developing your own talent, and being able to see that through. And I think data champions is a great pathway for that. Stacey, last but not least, I'm going to let you wrap up from our panel discussion. Does
Yeah,
the introduction of data champions aid your job, or is it seen as a dilution of your role?
I personally don't see it as a dilution of my role, and the reason being is that I will always take responsibility for data protection within Torridge. So if anything goes wrong, if we have a major breach, that's down to me. But I think of it in this way: there is absolutely no point in me being an expert in data protection if no one else within the organization knows anything about it. Because you have, part of our role is to have that culture within Torridge to make everyone aware of data protection. So I don't feel like I'm would be doing my role justice if I didn't get that knowledge out to the teams. I'm not asking them to be experts in it. I'm asking for an awareness, and we put the policies and procedures in place so that they can follow the policies and procedures. And as I said earlier, in my mind, I do not know all the information that is coming in and out of Torridge, and that's it. I just cannot know, and I don't think any data protection officer can. The people that are within those teams have far greater knowledge. So I see it as part of my role to train others, to let them know what to do in the data in the event of a breach, but hopefully to prevent that breach ever occurring in the first place. So that's my thinking on it, and that's why I've always been really keen to have champions, so they can monitor what's going on with their teams, but also to make sure all staff within Torridge have at least a basic awareness. We're not asking them to be experts, but have an awareness. And at least it minimises our risk. We take it very seriously within Torridge. It's part of our risk register, and we review our policies regularly on it. So I don't know if that's specifically answered the question, but I think everyone needs to know data protection, because it does invariably ingrain on every part of our daily life, really.
Stacey, you sound in a very happy place, so I'm not going to challenge you. You sound in a very happy place with it, and if it works for you, ladies and gents, whatever works for you, I think is the answer to that question. Whatever works for your organisation is the answer to that question. I've got one point that Paul's raised in the chat box, and Paul, we haven't got time to go into detail, but Paul's just made a point about how the data champion training changed. Well, I think the challenge is around data champion training is that you have to target towards the individuals, as Natalie said, that you're actually dealing with and what their role is going to be. But certainly from our experience, Paul, with working with a large unitary authority when we did the data breach root cause analysis, and what we did is we looked at 60 data breaches and looked at the root cause and what remediation we could put in place, people, process, technology, and where some of those issues were, that they certainly felt that having someone to go to saying, I'm not quite sure about this email, or I'm not quite sure, for example, that I should open this, was a real benefit to individuals sitting within that team as well. And going back to succession planning, I keep on banging on about it's about developing your workforce, not only each individual, one of them to have an awareness, but two, if you could get a bunch and cohort of keen beings who are really keen to develop, as Barry quite rightly says, the apprentice scheme is a fantastic apprentice scheme to develop other skills, then look, when Barry's out of a job, when I'm long gone, when Natalie's gone, and when Stacey's moved on to chief executive somewhere, and Stacey, I hope I'm not getting in trouble, but you haven't applied for chief executive, but if you move on to your next role as such, when we're long gone, there's someone who can say, actually, we know someone who's just able to step up and take this responsibility and take this role. Team, that's 11:50. We never go the hour because I always like to wrap up early. I'd like to thank Stacey. Thank you very much for your support today. We've had lots of participants on today who I know are practitioners, and you got to give us some useful tips. Barry, as ever, what can we say? Thank you very much for your insight, particularly in a different environment in health. That's been very, very helpful to understand that. And Natalie, thank you very much from your consultancy angle and working with the training and working with Torrent and some of the challenges that you might have. We are running a Privacy Pulse webinar in January. It is about data sharing and safeguarding. And that's particularly off the back of the sentencing of 2 individuals last week for in essence the unlawful killing of a young child in their care, but also going back to Victoria Aklombe incidents and some of the things and some of the fears that we talked about today around using data and data sharing. So watch out for that. For those people certainly in safeguarding roles, in health, in education, you'll certainly be really interested in that one as well. So have a good break over the holiday period. Keep safe, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on Privacy Pulse.